Welcome to Built from Scratch. On this show, I interview entrepreneurs under 30 to hear about the stories of their initial success. My goal is to encourage the next generation of leaders to take action and make a difference. I'm Eric Libby, and on today's episode, I'm going to be talking about my journey from starting a company when I was just 18 years old. So, per the fashion for every entrepreneurial interview that I do, we start back at the very beginning when the entrepreneur is just getting started. A lot of that for the entrepreneurs has been like the elementary years or early childhood when they've shown some signs of early entrepreneurship. And so reflecting on today, there were maybe three or four, five different experiences when I was a kid that I didn't know it at the time, but now looking back, were absolutely early inception ideas of what being an entrepreneur was like. So one of the first ones that I remember was when I was doing these lemonade stands when I was a kid. My parents would have a garage sale. I'd come in and buy lemonade, sell lemonade and little wafer cookies. And at the time, again, I understood the simple economics of it. Let's buy this for cheap. Let's sell it for more. This is fun. We've had people coming up and buying lemonade. People are supporting us. But I didn't really think of it as like, oh, I'm an entrepreneur. I think my parents, when I was younger, always said that I was such a little sales guy. They'd say, "Oh, he's going to be a sales guy. He's always selling something." And I think that experience with lemonade also stemmed into a few other experiences that I remember pretty clearly. You had silly bands, which was like these little bracelet things a lot of people would wear. Sometimes people would have like a sleeve of these silly bands, and then you have jub jubs. They're like things you put on like a top of a pencil, a little pencil topper. And I remember when I was a kid, I used to do like these little these little like scheme. I wouldn't even call it a scheme, but it was just like these little games where you'd have a bunch of people that would buy in. So everyone would put in 10, and then I do a raffle and say there was 10 people who did it. So we'll say, for example, the silly bands, there was 10 different people that put in 10 silly bands. Well, now the winner is going to get 60, and then the next place would get 20, and then the next place would get 10. So we have three winners. If 10 people put 10 in, no matter what, I'm getting 10 back. And so I do these things where these games were like getting people involved, always trying to take initiative, and didn't know it at the time, but always just trying to figure out how can I earn more money. And then there's another early childhood experience that I remember, and I don't at all think that you need to do this. It's just almost identifying like what did your early life look like? Were there signs of initial entrepreneurship? And maybe there was things that when you were just a kid, you don't even recognize it, because I didn't recognize it until I started a business. Then I look back, I'm like, oh, I get it now. But the last experience I remember, and this was pretty funny to reflect back on, but we had this thing in our neighborhood when I lived in Minnesota, and it was the club, or we had club money. So what I would do, and I mean, this is like a perfect idea where I just get passionate about an idea and just go and try and figure it out. So we'd have all these sports competitions. So we'd have baseball, we'd have basketball, and you'd pick to be on certain teams. So we had maybe 12, 15 neighbor kids that were all assigned to a team. And now we do these major tournaments. So I'd create little brackets. I do this right on like a big sheet of paper. So I did have like a big sheet of paper, and I write out this bracket tier. There's 4 or 5 teams that are playing. We start with football. The winner of that gets $100,000 in club money, which is so funny because I'm going back, like thinking about this. I'm like, I used to literally take pieces of paper, cut them out, and hand people club money. Then from there, they take that club money, and then they'd go and buy things. They could have like it had currency value to some extent. You could go and buy freezer pops and drinks out of my parents' fridge in our house. And so it was just like really dumb idea. I mean, it was just like a fun thing that I just tried when I was a kid, and got a bunch of the neighborhood kids involved. But I think reflecting back on those experiences, is there was just a lot of things that I would try and do to be some sort of quasi leader, just try and run something, be in charge of something, like starting a club and then getting a bunch of neighbor kids involved. Just always loved staying active and involved in many things. So I think that's kind of the intro idea of where my entrepreneurial ideas, passion started. And now when I fast forward to high school, so that was like when I was a kid, and now in 2015, I believe, it was 2016. We moved from Minnesota, where I grew up. I grew up in Eden Prairie, Minnesota, and we moved to Florida. And so that was a completely different change for me. Didn't know anybody here except for my grandmother lived here. We came down here because it was super cold in Minnesota. We were just tired of that. And when we moved here, totally was just like a different person. I mean, I was so comfortable with the friends that I had. I was just we had this routine. We had down. I mean, all these friends I had. I grew up 14 years of life. I moved here right before my freshman year of high school, and just got comfortable and moved here. And I think those first few years, and I could tell you pretty much all up through high school, I made friends as I went on. And I mean, later in my high school career, like I had a lot of great friends that I enjoyed spending time with. But I'd say like I just was never someone in high school, and maybe just after I got out of like the really like childhood years, maybe after 8, 9, always someone that was more of a follower than a leader. I'd look to others and see what they were doing, and I want to copy what the others are. I always have someone I'd look up to, and someone to try and follow. And I think even like looking back at the high school years is, and for now, I'm someone that like I enjoy public speaking. I enjoy getting in front of people because it's a challenge. It's going up there and being precise with your language to give and deliver a message. But for the longest time, I remember I used to be extremely embarrassed to go up and give a presentation. Like my face would get all flushed red. I'd lose my words. I'd prepare like you wouldn't believe. Like I'd put a lot of time into it and try and memorize. And that was a big issue when public speaking. I tried and memorize everything, and I just completely lost my train of thought. I didn't have the confidence in what I was saying. And so in high school, I just was someone that just absolutely a follower, never was interested in doing anything really that productive. I did do Daytona State, which was like a dual enrollment program, so I started to make progress on my college classes. But I was never someone that was a great student. I didn't love school. I was probably a B, maybe B plus average, and kind of just got by, and that was good enough for me. And I remember those years were definitely pivotal because there was a time in 2020 towards the end of this is when COVID is just about to get going, but the close to the end of my senior year of high school, and I had a major moment in my life that just realized there was a lot of things I was doing that I just weren't productive. I wanted to be someone that just be more confident in the person I was, make more progress than the things that I was spending my time on. And in 2020, had a really pivotal moment where I decided like I am tired of just checking the box, just going through the motions. And I made a commitment to myself in that 2020 year where I would go and I would begin reading the Bible, which was a completely new thing for me. I grew up like a lukewarm Christian, or like you call them like Creasters, like Christmas and Easter, going to church throughout the week or throughout the year, and never really knew what that meant. I just knew I was curious. I had people in my life that were talking about it. My Uncle John was pivotal in sharing that with me and getting me interested in almost just as a general whole pursuing wisdom, because I thought I knew truth, but there's so many things that I didn't understand. And so focusing on that and then starting to read, which I think is a big one for any entrepreneur, anyone that wants to get better. I think there's such a value, at least for me, there has been in reading and trying to pursue wisdom. And I think in the Bible, for sure, there's been so many lessons that I've taken away, whether you're religious or spiritual or not. There's so many fundamental ideas of how we operate as people that there's timeless truths. I mean, this is written thousands of years ago, and there's things that are still practical today, which is incredible. But on just the pursuing wisdom side, I'm just reading books. I mean, really in 2020 for me, pivotal moments because I got really invested in learning about specifically business, because I was starting to get into those years where I was going to go into college, taking those next steps. So I remember the first book I read, which was like extremely boring. I don't know why I picked this for my first book, but I think it was called How Capitalism Will Save Us by Steve Forbes. And I remember I had to, at the beginning, I had to grind through that. I mean, it was a 300-page book. And I remember just going through it and I was just like, this is like the most boring, dry thing. But I was like, I'm just going to start because I just need to start making progress. And that was later on. I'll highlight this moment right now, but later on, I didn't realize the importance of this. A lot of it's just starting. Like I had no idea what I was doing. I was like, all right, I'm just going to start reading. I don't even think I finished a full book. I sometimes when presenting, I'll talk to some of the students, some of these classes I go into to speak and say, before 2020, I don't think I finished an entire book. And now I think today maybe I finished 100 or 120 or so in 5 years, 5 years of time. But I mean, it just wasn't important. It wasn't something that I thought about. I didn't think, I mean, I was a SparkNote guy for all my classes in school. I just tried to get by as whatever was the easiest route. I chose the easiest route. And so that 2020 year was a big pivotal moment because that's where I went on to end up starting the To-Do Dudes company. So that was right at the turn of 2019 going into 2020. Made some big commitments to myself. I really wanted to have a change in myself that year. And then coming into 2020, May specifically of 2020 is when the business, the To-Do Dudes, got started. So crazy story how this all began. This was now like when classes are just kind of wrapping up. And so this is when I was 18 years old. I was helping my grandma with a bunch of her projects around the house. So helping her with, I'm a little bit taller, so helping her grab those things off the top shelf, taking the things out of the back of her car, helping her wipe down her countertops when she needs, like just little simple things around the house that she just simply didn't have the time to do, couldn't do around the house. And there was one day she had 200 bags of lava rock, like these, like, I mean, you put them around your yard, and I mean, if 200 bags of lava rock, like that takes a good amount of time, like a half a day. And so she puts them in her front driveway, says, Eric, you're assigned to do this for the day. And so I was like, all right, like happy to help out Grandma. We're gonna make it work. And so throughout the day, I put in my headphones. I don't have them with me right now, but put in my headphones and start getting to work. I was expecting like 4 or 5, 6 hours of time to do this. And within that first hour, there were people on the golf course adjacent to her home. She lives right on a golf course. They're driving by in their golf carts, and somebody comes off the course, and I kind of see this person walking towards me. I take out my headphone, and I'm like, "How's it going? Like, what's up?" They're like, "Oh my gosh, you do this for your grandma? You help her with her yard work?" I was like, "Yeah, I do. Can you help me remove a plant in my yard? I've been meaning to do it for the longest time. I just don't have the labor to get it done." I said, "Okay, sure, happy to help." 10 minutes go by, this group leaves, and 10 minutes go by, and another group shows up, and I have my back turned towards the course. I know I see out of the corner of my eye another group comes up, and I'm working. Now somebody comes up behind me. I have my headphones in. I'm blasting maybe at the time like some Eminem song or something crazy. Like couldn't hear anything. This person comes up and they scare me, and I jump. I'm like, oh my gosh, and they're like, oh my. They say, Eric, you do this stuff for your grandma? Can you come help me with detailing my car? And I, like, first I was startled. I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, sure. And they asked, do you have a business card? I'm like kind of just laughed. I was like, no, I just help my grandma I mean, when she needs help. Like, this isn't serious. I don't do this like all the time. And they're like, well, just here, give me your number. I'm gonna give you a call. I really need this help. I was like, okay, great. So now another 15 minutes go by, and a third person comes up, and then a fourth, and then a fifth. It was 5 people in one day. Now, mind you, I had no intention of starting a business. This is still in a period of my life where I'm just not super confident. I had a job at the golf course near our home, and that was a great job. It was pretty repetitive. We did the same thing almost every day, but it was a great first job for being in high school. But I didn't have the confidence to go and like, had the passion to go, I'm gonna go start a business. But you have 5 people in one day that say something, and it was just like these light bulbs went off. I'm like, okay, there has to be something here. And so simply I got to the drawing board. I'm like, okay, these people need my help. I gave them their phone number. They're probably going to give me a call, but like, let's see if we can actually take this to the next level. And so the first line of business, and immediately, this is why failure is so important throughout the journey. First line of business, I designed a little logo. It was initially called the Hammock To-Do Dudes because of where we are in Palm Coast, and designed this little logo. Looked okay, like it was good enough to put out there for a first flyer. That first flyer, for those of you watching the video version, I'll put it on the screen here. But it was a picture of me in a hooded sweatshirt. And I had a neighborhood friend of mine. I said, hey, do you want to start helping out some neighbors? I'm going to start doing this and see where it goes. And he said, yes. So he had a collared shirt. I had a hooded sweatshirt on that said Adidas on it. And first line of business, we print these out. We're going to go give 60 of these flyers. We printed out 60, super proud. Going to go pass them around the neighborhood. And so I get walking, I have these 60, I have them in a little folder, and I start walking up and down a gated community HOA association. And I start taking these flyers and I'm opening up people's mailboxes and I'm putting them inside the mailboxes. I had no idea that's like one of the first, like if you're in an HOA association and you're soliciting, like that is so easy for them to get on you for that. Like it's one flyer goes in a mailbox and they're going to be up in arms and pissed off about it. And somehow I got like 50 passed out and I felt super accomplished after. And maybe 20 minutes go by, finish doing this, 20 minutes go by and my phone rings and I'm like, there's no way. Like we literally just did this. We're already getting a phone call. Like phone's not ringing all the time. So it's just like 20 minutes after, like it has to be business. I pick up my phone and I look at it and it says main gate. And so if you live in an HOA or a gated community, when it says main gate, that means the security in the gated community is calling you. And so I answer the phone. I said, hello. And the guard guy, awesome dude. But he goes, hey, Eric. He knows me because my grandmother lives in the community. But he goes, hey, Eric, not sure what's going on here, but 7 people have called and said that someone is putting stuff in mailboxes around the neighborhood. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I've been doing that. He goes, yeah, you cannot be doing that here. Like people are pissed. And I was like, okay. So I thought that was the end of the business idea. So from there, I think the business is completely killed. Like I'm like, okay, well, tried our best, passed out 50, but we did have one call. And that's all it took. It was one call from that said, you know what, I'm going to give you a try. I want to support young entrepreneurs. I really like what you're doing. You probably shouldn't be putting this in the mailbox, but I do like what you're doing. And so my grandmother's, one of her neighbors gave us a try. And I remember that first job. So we have first failure is we get called in trouble from the security at the gated community. That first job, we're excited. I'm working with my friend of mine that, we're just going to go help out those neighbors. And the first job's going very well. They supply us the tools for our company. We were just going to be a simple labor service. We're going there to just be the extra hand. And so when we first get started, we got the shovel. We're actually removing a plant. And so we got the shovel, got a little axe to get in there. It's, it's kind of tough. It's a Defender plant. It's pretty rooted into the ground. And so we start this, we're taking it out, making good progress, feeling accomplished, maybe 45 minutes in, okay, things are going great. Starts getting a little bit thicker. We get down, say, okay, it's getting tough. Now we're taking the axe, cutting some of those branches or the roots, and now it's really tough, and we hit it with an axe, and what we notice is there's a little water that starts to pool up. And we're like, that's weird. Like the plant must have had water left in it. And so we kind of dig it out a little bit and we put dirt back on it, thinking that's like going to cure the solution. Like not a smart idea. And then it continues. The water continues. And we're like, okay, well, that's not good. So we completely dig it out and end up realizing we hit a pool pipe. And you fast forward another 20 minutes from there and half of their pool drained out of their pool. So now we're like, this is our first job. Like we're not insured. We don't have an LLC. Like we don't have, this is the first idea of a business. And we're like, okay, immediately the business, the idea of a business is shut down because they say no soliciting. So basically no marketing. Like that's the only idea I had of marketing was going to pass around flyers. The next idea, let's actually do the work because we got business, and it immediately goes terribly wrong. And we're like, wow, we're so sorry. We did clarify beforehand, like, was there any pipes here? And the customers said no, but still it's our responsibility. It doesn't matter. And so immediately from day one, we're already behind. And it's like, okay, wow, like we should not continue. But thankfully, we did get another call. So it started with that person next door, and then somebody down the street, and then a street over, and then in another part of the community. And it was just those first few people that really gave us a shot to get the business moving, like have a little bit of momentum. I had no idea what I was doing as a business owner. I was like, I'm just going to help, and we're going to charge a fair price, and we're going to do good work. That's simply how it started. Like there was a market that we created because we would show up on time. Like the problem that many of our customers said was at the beginning, the handyman that we're committing to them, I will be there at Monday at 8 a.m. would then, it would get to Monday. Now it's 10 a.m. They wouldn't show up. Now it's 2 p.m. They wouldn't show up. Now they wouldn't even hear from them. It goes a full day and they didn't even hear from the people. So the problem we were solving was simply, we're going to go in there with a smile. We're going to be able to help you out. And we're going to show up when we say we're going to show up. And I wasn't an expert, but it was just that promise. Keeping a promise is so valuable in business. Like that's one thing to like double click on as someone starting a company, is your word goes the longest way. Like set expectations and hit expectations, and you'll continue to get repeat business, and you'll get people that will actually refer you to other customers. It's such a simple concept. It's so hard for people to actually do. It's doing what you say you're going to do. That's simple. That's how it really started. So now moving into 2021, that's when we started. And it was, that first year, got, I think maybe 60, 70 jobs or so. But now you move into 2021, and now my college starts. I start to get in the full swing of going to Stetson University. And at first it was I wouldn't say it was an easy thing, but it was easier than when I moved on campus, because for that first year I was a commuter student. So with COVID, it didn't make sense to live on campus. I did still have 2 days a week where I'd have to go in person. But, just having that ability to be here throughout the time, through the other days, when Tuesday, I think it was Tuesday, Thursday, I'd be going on campus. The other days of the week, I'd be able to work. It worked out perfect. I was doing school from afar. And, on my days where I was on campus, I just wouldn't schedule any jobs. The days where I was off, I would be working. And there was a period in there too where I transitioned. I was working at the golf course and finally pushed that to the side and was like, you know what, like I was doing that, and I was kind of, the To-Do Dudes was kind of a side hustle for me. But now I go more into like, let's go full-time To-Do Dudes and just see what happens. Like I had no idea, but let's see what happens. And like, it's still like a great like part-time thing while I'm in school, just, trying it out. And so I remember now flashing back to 2021, because this was a couple of interesting things happened that year. One of the learning lessons, and I should have learned this like from the beginning when I was doing, when we were working and we made that first mistake. I mean, there's so many mistakes that were made when we first started, but I just didn't even consider insurance. I didn't even consider like what was an LLC. And so there was a customer we worked for, and great customer of ours. Like we still help her multiple times. We love working for her. But I remember in 2021, she exceeded the $600 amount, which if you go over $600 with a one individual, you have to give I think it's called a W-9. And basically just saying that you gave them more than 600 so you can write it off for your taxes. And she requested one for me, and I was like, well, I'm not like an established LLC, like I can do it on my personal. And she's like, well, I would highly suggest you get an LLC. Like it would make more sense for your business structure. Start considering getting insurance. And like at the time, I was like, I took that feedback and I was just like that's like the dumbest thing ever. Like it's like almost resentful towards, why do I have to go do this? Like things are working great right now. Like you're gonna go and impede what I'm doing. But now I look after and I'm like, no, that was absolutely the right call. Like it was absolutely the thing I had to do, was go and get an LLC, start to think about insurance. As we're bringing on more people within our organization, like that next step was even like getting workers comp, like making sure if somebody gets hurt on a job. There's so many times where we've had situations that were like such close calls, and it's like, I mean, thousands of dollars that would have come out of pocket because we just weren't insured. We didn't have the right things at the very beginning of the company. So that was a big thing in 2021 at the very beginning of the company. Was like, just we had to get fully covered and insured and make sure that if there was a mistake that happened, we were able to cover against it. So another thing that in 2021 that, and I think it's the final thing on 21 before we go into 22, is I have a really different conception of leadership at the time compared to what I do now. There's so many things I've learned with working with people. Now that we're at 20, I believe we're at 24 people within the organization. But at the very beginning, I would work with all of our team members as if they were like great friends, and saying things like I look back at some of these texts and it's just so funny to look at, but saying like talking in like slang tone, or like saying like, hey dude, like what's going on, like how we doing, just, I don't know if I have a perfect example of it, but it would be just in a very unprofessional way, and not at all as like a leader. It was just more talking like a friend. Like we're buddies, we're hanging out, like, hey man, can you just go do that? If they wouldn't be able to do it, and like that was their job to do, it would just be like, hey, no sweat, I'll take care of it myself. And I do really believe that there is such an importance in having a strong relationship with your coworkers, with your direct reports, people that you employ at your company. But there's not a relationship that is like, we're best friends, we're hanging out, we're just good old pals. There has to be a clear line in the sand. And so I look back at some of those texts and in the way I approached leadership at the time, and just completely like was not able to put my foot down in some things that needed decisions that need to be made. But I was more just like, well, he'll figure it out. She'll work on it. It's all good. We're chilling. But it not setting the proper expectations, then it's a streamline effect. It goes in so many areas. So it starts with the employee, but obviously the employee is working for the customer. And so if we're lax with the team member, and they work for the customer, they're also going to be lax, and it's not going to end up in a good experience. So our expectations have completely changed. And this is like one of the biggest takeaways that I had in 21. And so now in 2022, this is where we go into getting workers' compensation. So now we realize like, okay, we're starting to have people that are actually should be qualified as employees. And so we move people to the W-2 model, going from 1099 to W-2, getting workers' compensation. So what that means is protecting if anybody gets injured on a job, that we are covered in that case. So up to that point, basically, if someone got hurt, we would be out a lot of money, or it would be the customer's responsibility. So it just gives customers a peace of mind. It allows us to have peace of mind if somebody does get injured. Never, like, God forbid that happens. We never want that to happen, but if it did, we did have that covered. And it was just figuring it out, like just realizing like, okay, we're taking on more risk. We're doing a lot more job. Like at this point, like we should consider doing this. And we had a couple of people, a couple of my mentors and just customers that used us were like, hey, you should probably consider this. Like, we love your business model, but you got to be careful. If anything does happen, you want to be protected. So that was a big one in 2022. So first, actually backtrack a little bit. End of 21 is when I moved on campus. And so this was a pivotal moment in our company where we had our now general manager, Cameron, and he stepped in and basically ran the company from afar. Like I was at school and he was able to, in DeLand, which is only about an hour from where I live, but he was able to take the reins and really run the team while I was away. I'd still come back on weekends. Anytime I could come back, I would hop into the field, help out where I could. But in terms of the operations, just absolutely handling anything, making sure customers were taken care of. And so one thing that I'll highlight right here is there's just such a value in having great people within your organization, and great people who actually care. And so what Cam did for that time for us was he just was the really the backbone of our organization, and really took it in his own hands, really genuinely cared about providing great value service to our customers, and was an absolute leader during that time. So it was a tough period. When I'm at school, I can't give the business my 100%. And that's something I'm gonna lead into here in a second. But I can't give the business my 100% because I got classes. I'm an hour away from where our home service business is operating. There's a lot of things. I needed a good quality team to be able to run that. So through 21, end of 21, and then into 22, I lived on campus, and there was a few tough things during my time. I'm going to touch on one more thing on the 22 and this was probably, when I look back, one of the hardest things that I had to go through as an entrepreneur, the biggest reflection that I've had during my journey. And so in 2022, I get towards that end of that year, and there's a couple things I had. I mean, we had some successes that year. We were featured in a few publications. That year we had the opportunity while I was at Stetson to pitch in 2 pitch competitions. So there was one called the Cairns Foundation where the company won $5,000. We won second place in a Volusia College pitch competition, which was huge, like huge confidence builder, awesome experience. And then also there was one for in Chicago where Stetson paid the airfare and the travel for me to go out and pitch and place top, I believe it was top 20 in the world on a pitch competition. Another great experience. And that was in October of 22, but I still get to that end of that year. And now this is graduation for me. This is when graduation is coming up. I'm graduating in the fall, 22. And I get towards that. It was Thanksgiving time, and I realize I have about 14 days left. And I had so much anxiety, like just so much anxiety, so much just built up emotion of like there's 14 days left until I graduate and I'm not really sure what I'm going to do. Like at this point, if I want to go and get a sales job, which has always been on my mind, is something that I want to do, is like go get a sales job, very similar, follow what my parents have done. My mom's in real estate, my dad is a sales manager, very similar path, like that sales role. That's what I thought I was going to do. And so I realized 14 days left. I'm like, well, like this is like, I'm way behind if I'm going to do that. I felt like I was waiting too long. I just continued with the entrepreneurship thing. And then finally got there. I'm like, man, like I have to make a decision now quickly. And so this is a crazy story. I'm going to go a little bit of a tangent, but I think it'll be impactful. In There's that Thanksgiving time in 22, and my family went on a trip. And we did a couple of fun things during that time. I believe it was in North Carolina, in Tennessee. We were in that North Carolina, Tennessee area. And on that trip, this is one of the emotional parts of that I remember is that trip we went snowboarding. Family went skiing, I went snowboarding. And I remember sitting on the top of the hill, looking down at that hill. And this is probably a few days into that trip. And I'm looking down this hill and I'm like, Eric, what are you doing right now? Like seriously, what are you? You have 14 days left until graduation and you haven't made a decision. What are you doing right now? And I can't remember if I teared up or what happened, but I just remember I'm just like, this is crazy. Like we're 14 days away and I haven't made a decision. This felt crazy anxiety. And so I kind of like get out of that moment. Like it's totally still in my mind, but I go down the hill. And now a few days pass by. We're there for about 7 days. Happens day 2, and we're now on like day 4 or 5. Still on my mind, like very pressing. I'm like, I know when I get back, I'm going to have to face this as soon as I get back. Like this is just a temporary band-aid to be on this trip. I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna have to face this. And we went to Dollywood, which is a kind of like a Christian theme park in Tennessee. Dolly Parton is the person who started that. For those that don't know. And I remember going, we were spent the day there, a couple hours in. My brother's out way ahead. He's like running, he's like trying to get in line for this one roller coaster ride. And for those that know me, I am not one to like go and shop. I'm not a shopper. I don't like to go in these little like boutique shops, these little stores. But for some reason, I'm following my brother. He's maybe 50 yards ahead of me, and I'm trying to track him down. For some reason, this store to the left catches my attention. And I just like, okay, I look to the left, and then I look again, and I just decide to walk in. I don't know what came over me, what it was. I go in there, and immediately I walk into the store for like not even a few seconds. In my mind, my eyes like gravitate across the store. I see this little sticker on the wall. I'll put it on the screen for those watching the video because I took a picture of it. And my eyes gravitated. I walk right towards this. Crazy experience. And it says, walk by faith, not by sight. Walk by faith, not by sight. And when that happened, my mind was just like blown. It seems like on the surface, such a small moment, but I'm going through all this. I'm trying to decide. I don't know what's going on. And it was like this divine intervention. Like I honestly thought this was a sign from God to tell me like, you just need to trust the process. Like you're not going to know. You're never going to have all the answers. There's always going to be this or that. There's going to be pros for both. There's going to be cons for both. And you just have to make a decision and trust. One of the craziest moments of my entrepreneurial career, but I saw that immediately, peace just came over me. I'm just like, okay, I got it. I got the sign. I get it. I understand. And that's what I'm going to do. So I get back home. I graduate. Then I decide, let's do this full time. And I go into 2023 year and say, you know what? We are going all in. And now, reflecting back 2 years from now, I'm so excited that I actually did decide to make that move. Now, as I flash into the 2023 year, a lot of what that year was just finding how much I could actually accomplish when I wasn't splitting my focus. Like for the longest time, I was able to do both. I was able to do college, was able to do the business. And in a lot of ways in that 2022, 21 year, it was kind of like this like ego padding that I had, which was like, I'd like don't need to commit until I made that decision, like I'm going all in. It was like kind of like this, I can do a little bit of both. But it's crazy the amount of productivity you can have when you focus on just one thing and give that one thing your all. And for me in that 2023 year, I went all out and I said, you know what, this is the only thing I'm going to focus on. I'm going to go all in and I'm really going to try and figure this To-Do Dudes thing out. So spent the time, started to develop community partnerships, started to get featured in more publications, realizing and pushing myself to realize like I can work way harder than I thought what I knew what hard work was. Like I had this idea of like I'm going to work really hard. And then finally I graduate and I'm like, I can push myself to this next level. And now it's funny going in 2024 now, I look at 23 and I'm like, man, I wasn't even working I was working barely. Like there was nothing, I was scratching the surface barely from what I'm doing today. And I'll probably feel the same way in 25, but just really focus on just one thing and like putting everything else aside. Like I'm not distracted by college and all these spontaneous things and like going to hang out with friends all the time. Like I moved back into my home, my parents' house. And I'm like, all right, I'm just going to give this thing my all and like just focus on just working on the company. And so in that 23 year, there was the biggest learning that I took away. There's only one thing that I wrote down as a reflection for that year is we were working on a technology for probably it was about 9 months of time. And we just were way over ambitious. This is my first company. And I was thinking, let's build this proprietary software. Let's blow this thing up. And our concept is so simple. It's finding students that are looking for a flexible job. They want something they can grow and develop. They want to build a strong community. And we're trying to connect them to neighbors that just simply need the help with household chores. I just need an extra hand. And now we are the facilitator of that. We're vetting good people and we're finding good customers to work for, and we're connecting those two parties. And at the time, what made the most sense to us is let's bring on some developers, some student developers, so we don't have to pay them a ton. Let's bring them on and let's start developing our own software, building it from scratch, building it from the bottom, from nothing. Like we have zero code and we're going to build this thing up. Which for anyone starting to build their own technology, please, because I made this mistake and it's one of the biggest mistakes that I've made during the time, is like, please look to see if there's another way you can do it before spending all the money on a project. Now we've completely changed. We're on a CRM system that's a pre-built solution. It works great. But for the longest time, we were trying to build our own, and I had no idea what I was doing in terms of coding. We had two people that were really smart at what they did. They were, very green, still very raw in their talent. They were just getting started, but very intelligent. Very intelligent. We're able to accomplish a lot with the skill set of a student, but at the same time, still, we're a young business. We can't afford to make a bunch of mistakes. And so in that time, it was about 9 months of time that we were running on. We actually got our business running up on this web app. I think we crossed $20,000 in a month on it, which is crazy. It was like a Band-Aid thing thrown together, but we had customers using it. Like it worked. And we got to a point and it just realized like there's just so many small errors. Like there's a software that we can get for a tenth of the price and they can manage it. We don't have to worry about it because it wasn't a core function of the business. Our business is built on customer service and making sure that we're delivering a great customer experience. They don't necessarily care what the technology is like. They just want to make sure that person that comes out to their house is doing a great job, that there's someone that's reliable, someone that can communicate well. And so we are focusing on the wrong component of our business at the level we're at. Like, yeah, sure, we're 5-10 years in. Let's start working on our own proprietary software. But it was 2 years in. We're still trying to get proof of concept, and we're building something from the ground up. And anytime we build it, we're like, okay, well, that's not exactly what we want. So we need to pivot. and the pivots would just take a really long time to go through. So at the end of it, it was one of the hardest decisions that I've had to make as within the business, was deciding, we've spent 9 months of time on this, spent close to $10,000 in this time, and we need to completely cut it. Like, we need to stop. We need to let go of the developers. Look, we got to stop this project. And I mean, people within the company at the time were not happy with that decision. It was a tough thing. We invested so much time, so much energy, passion into it. People were really excited about what we were doing. And at the time, we just had to make the decision that, while it's a tough one, it's something we have to make if we want to stay in business. And one of the things I like to say with like the game of business is, it's not really something where you can say, not like a football game where you can say like, we won 27-20 and we won the game. A lot of business is just staying in business. It's like, what can I do to like make sure that I can actually hit payroll next week, and make sure that we don't go out of business in a month because we're making stupid decisions today. It's what can you do to stay in business? And then the better and better you get, it's like you can continue to increase your profit margins, increase the amount of revenue. But the goal of business is to stay in business. It's an infinite game that we're playing. So in 2023, that was one of the biggest learning experiences that I had, was trying to find a solution first. Like, don't necessarily take the hardest way just because it sounds cool. Like, find something that's going to solve the problem. And not everything has to be perfect. Like, it does from end to end. Like, we're building the perfect solution. Like, there's some compromises you have to make at the beginning. And it's like, if you make one decision, like if we make that decision to have developers, we're going to be suffering in cash flow if we're not careful of that. So it just didn't make sense. But we had to make the decision. And one of the hardest decisions I had to make in 23. So you have the walk by faith, not by sight, which is a great moment for me, just kind of reconfirming that I should continue with the entrepreneurship route. You have this decision to cut the web app. And now in 2024, we jump off, we start that year, and we are predicting, as we've had for the longest time, I think for the first 21 to 22, 22 to 23, we saw over 100% increase in revenue each year. It was growing very steadily. And now you get to beginning of 24, and we hire someone for a CS role and customer support. And we're like, okay, well, based on last year's projection, we're going to double our revenue. And so let's bring on somebody to come answer phone calls for us. And while we projected that, the revenue actually dipped below the previous number. So it didn't 2x. It was at that same point and actually a little bit lower, while we just increased to a full-time role. And immediately it was about a month and a half in, and we were just bleeding cash. I mean, losing so much cash. It was like our runway turned into quickly, like we never lost that much money ever. And it quickly turned into like, if we didn't make any changes quickly, we were going to be out of business in 2 months. And that's 3.5 years into the business, almost 4 years into the business. And we were going to be out of money in like 2 months. And so again, another situation comes up where it's like, this is just really unfortunate. Like, we were really excited to make this next push. The team was behind it. We had all the momentum, and then we have to change directions. And we had to let go of 8 people at that time. Not fun conversations that I wanted to have, not things that were enjoyable to do, but there were things that needed to happen. And, sometimes the decisions you make, and I'm getting better at this as a leader, like there's still a lot of things that I need to learn, but sometimes we're going to have to make an unpopular decision. We're going to have to go with it. There's going to be a lot of people that are against it, that don't like it, that feel uncomfortable. They don't like change, but it's a decision that has to be made. And as the leader of a company, it is, if you listening to this is someone that wants to start a company or has a company, it is your responsibility to make the tough decision, even when everybody else is against you, but you have to do it. Like, at the end of the day, you have to make that decision. It's a hard one to make, and it's not fun. It's not easy, but it needs to be done. And so at 2024, that was another big learning that I had to make. So kind of coming into the rest of this year, we've had some great successes. We've started to actually increase the net profit of our net profit margins of our business. Really, this year I've started to focus on data, which is a really key part of a business. Up to this point, I've been kind of running it willy-nilly, just like, okay, great, we've got a lot of jobs, that's great, we're bringing a lot of revenue. But at the end of the day, You can bring in $100,000 in revenue in a month, and if your expenses are 120, it's a failing business. And so it was for us, it was really understanding how much is it required to get a lead, track the customer acquisition costs. How much is it? What's the lifetime value of the customer? If they come in once, are they expected to come in 2, 3, 4 times? What kind of discounts do we need to give the customer to get them back in the door on a more consistent basis? What is our profit margin? All these little numbers, like putting them all together, so incredibly helpful. It gives you a pulse in the business to actually know where you're at. But in a lot of cases, especially new business owners, you don't do that. You don't look at the numbers. But it's so, so, so important. Like one of the biggest takeaways I've had is there's two big failures you can make that you've seen that I've made. It's either with numbers, not understanding your numbers. That's what happened to me in 24 is I didn't get the numbers completely. I kind of made a judgment call. And on the other side is people, is finding the wrong people for the business. And for me, I mean, the highlighting just the numbers and data component, got to know your numbers. So that was for sure a big one. But since then, really been starting to work more on the numbers. And then in September, we had the opportunity to launch our To Do Dudes app, which was huge. So now in the app stores, and I think there's still a lot of potential moving forward. Like we've made some serious significant process. Our team is gelling very well right now. We have great field technicians that are out there doing great work, but still raising the bar, continuing to expand our services, increase the amount of revenue we're bringing as a company. We were double this year will be about a 50 to 60% increase, but it's still, what can we do to keep elevating our experience? How can we get the word out to more people? And so that is just such a big one in business. As I kind of wind down my time here, I know this is a little bit longer podcast, but just trying something new for this time. I'm going to have a couple reflections. I have three questions that I've asked every guest that I wanted to answer. I think would have a unique answer to these questions, but three questions I've asked the guests that I would like to answer, and then I'm going to go into what the future looks like, and of course the final quote of the time here. So first question on the reflection side is, what do I do when things are not going well? When I need to bounce back, I'm like frustrated, I'm down and out, I'm in the valley. What are the things I do? And so for me, what I've found really works, and those times are inevitable. Like they're going to happen when everything is chaos. There's no real control that I have over a situation. It's going to happen. And so some of the things that I do are it's honestly like getting back to the basics. And if we can win on the basics, we're going to be beating most people. It's so simple for me, but a lot of times it's like, I'm going to get up when my alarm tells me to. I'm going to make my bed. I'm going to take a cold shower in the morning. I'm going to get a workout in. And like doing those simple things right there, like if I'm just like feeling a place where I'm anxious, I can't make decisions properly, maybe I'm like self-conscious about certain things, like that's all I gotta do. Like reset. Like just go in and reset, make sure you do the simple things right. And you like build up the little victories. Like those little victories like are monumental. Like when you decide to snooze the alarm, you're basically telling yourself, like, I'm okay when things get tough, I'm gonna roll over. That's what you're doing, like getting comfortable. And so like doing the things that are pushing me to get uncomfortable. So like even reflecting, making sure I'm spending time to read, making sure I have the time to like sit and like meditate. Like those are all like great, and I try my best to do them. And those are almost like add-ons, but like the simple things is just like get up when your alarm tells you to get up, go and get a workout in, like go get a sweat. It's something that you can control. It's physical. It's not so much mental. Like you can physically like work out what you're doing. So always something for me that is really helpful to just reset my mind. So on the next one is, what would I have done differently? So if I were to go back to 2020, like what would I tell myself to make, or how would I do things differently? And so for me, I think reflecting back on the time, like every decision, every situation that's happened has like every negative situation, I wouldn't take it back because there's a scar there and I've learned from those mistakes. A lot of things that I'm like, wow, I was just so green. I was making decisions that were just not smart as a leader. But now looking back, I'm like, I would never make those mistakes again. And so I think like just maybe not a specific time, but maybe an approach that I would tell myself to approach differently is, there's a lot of times when these difficult situations that have come up, and as a leader, and especially like I've never like there's a lot of situations I encounter that I've never done it before. I've never experienced something like it before. And I'm not, and there's been times where I haven't been 100% confident in that decision. I made a decision, made it in more of like a passive way. And I think like if I reflect back on some of these times where the team is looking like it, as a CEO, it is your job to make the difficult decision. And when things are tough, like I said earlier, when things are tough, people are looking to you and maybe they're judging the decision. You got to be confident and just make the call. Like there's gonna be times when the call's wrong, but to make a call and then change, that is so hard for your team to follow you and actually respect you as a leader. Make the decision and stick to it. And you got to trust your gut with that decision sometimes. And so I think looking back, like what I would have done differently is when I've approached some of these situations, maybe 3-4 times where there's been a really tough decision on the table, it's being ultra 100% clear and like this is the direction we're going and this is what we got to do despite any pushback. And sometimes in the past where there's been pushback, I haven't 100% committed to that. I'm like, oh, okay, I can see the other side and let's back up a little bit from making that decision. But being 100%, this is what we're going to do. Like, it's unfortunate, but this is what we're going to do. This is why it's important. This is why we need to make this change and just make the decision. I think that's for me, if I could reflect back. And every time I've gotten a little bit better, but there's always room for improvement. I'm like, just being 100% ultra clear, this is how it's going to be. Now, in terms of the final reflection question I had here is like, what would I tell my younger self? A little bit on the point of like, what would I have done differently, but more like advice. Like if I were to go back to 2020 self or just young Eric self, like what advice would I give? What advice would I give? And I think some of the biggest advice is to not let the ego get too comfortable. What I mean by that is like, there's times where as people, humans, we compare ourselves to others or we compare ourselves to what we think is good or bad. And if you think you're doing a really good job, and this is what happened for me in 23 to 24, or when I reflect 24 back years prior when I thought I was working hard, is you almost put yourself as a comparison to what you think good is. And you're like, yep, I'm doing good. I feel comfortable with myself. I put a hard day of work in. And I think my ego has been just or my what I've thought my bar is, I've gotten comfortable with like this is good enough. And then I realized like, man, I just going forward now, like I look back, I'm like, man, I had so much extra in the tank. Like I had so much more to give. And there was a great quote that Zach Richards, he was the episode, I believe 5 or 6, that when he came on the podcast, he said that, and it was by the quote was by Andy Grove. And the quote is, only the paranoid survive. We like to boost our ego, make ourselves feel all great. But when we do that and we feel comfortable, like, wow, like compared to that person or compared to what I was doing, I'm doing just fine. I'm doing good. I feel like happy with myself. What I've realized is a lot of times where I've left a lot on the table. Like there's still so much discretionary effort I could have gotten, but I chose to take it comfortable, ease off the gas a little bit, because when I measured up to other people, that's a big one. It's like measuring up to other people. Sometimes you may say like, wow, they're so much better than me, but sometimes you might say like, wow, I'm so much better than them. And when you get to that place, it's not a good place to be, because if you take your foot off the gas, people are going to catch up. Like, and two, you're leaving potential effort of who you could become, the person that you could be, on the table. And so for me, if I look back, I give advice to 18-year-old Eric. I'm like, do not get comfortable. Do not let your ego take over. Do not let yourself be just comfortable, doing just fine, doing enough to get by. Like, get uncomfortable, do the tough things, because when you do those, you unlock a whole other part of yourself that you would never see. So that's a big one for me, is I would give that advice to my future self. So as for to-do dudes going forward, because it's another question I've asked the guests, is this is a great, like what the question I suppose I should state it is, what does the to-do dudes look like at scale? Like what is the long-term goal of like Eric Livy and the to-do dudes? And for me, the to-do dudes has been a great learning opportunity for business. Like how do you put a management structure together, how to set clear expectations, how to track numbers, how to actually have an ops part of your company, marketing, finance, HR, like all these things put together. Like I have in these 4 years, almost 5 years, have built some of the fundamental basics that I need to know with business that are going to serve for the countless other businesses that I run in the future. And so my long-term goal is to be a serial entrepreneur. I love business. I love to think about it. I love to do it in my free time. Pretty much almost all I do is work out, think about business. And my long-term goal would to be a VC, like a venture capitalist investing in other companies. And for that, I think I need to learn a lot more about business and other types of businesses. And I think long-term goal is just being a serial entrepreneur and building $1 billion company. It's far away from where I am right now, but I think there is things that I'm doing with the To-Do Dudes, things I would like to learn about that are setting the foundation with what that could be moving into the future. And to be clear, that'd be market valuation of the company. But saying it first time here, just something that I'm very passionate about is business and really want to continue building, being a serial entrepreneur, continue building companies, things that offer a lot of value to the world. So there's my goal. I'm going to finish with a quote. That's how I finish every episode on Built from Scratch. And I really had to, funny enough, like I love quotes. I post a lot of quotes on personal content on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. But it was a little tough for me to think because there's a lot of great quotes I love. There's a lot of people I look up to that, you have like the Think Different by Steve Jobs, like one of the best pieces of one of the best commercials ever. Like something that inspires me. I love Steve Jobs. But I have to go with a quote by Theodore Roosevelt. It's a long quote, but one that means a lot to me. I'm going to read it first and I'll tell you why it means a lot to me. And then I'm going to have a call to action to the next generation as to how they can use this quote to change the world and make a huge difference in the world we live in today. So the quote is, "It's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by the dust, sweat, and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming. But who does actually strive to do the deeds? Who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat." And so Theodore Roosevelt, just as a side note, is a really cool dude. Did a lot of different things throughout his career. He was a politician. He was a police officer, a horseback rider, or a cowboy, I should say. But specifically on this quote, I think one of my pursuits in life is I want to know I get to my deathbed and I left everything I had on the field. I didn't leave anything to chance. I gave this everything I possibly have. I came into heaven's gates or whatever that looks like, and my body's beat up, bruised, like in the quote it says, just marred in the mud, like just beat up because I left it all on the line. And one of the things that scares me most is not doing everything I possibly can to live up to the potential, the God-given potential that I believe we all have as people. And so I read that quote and it's just an inspiration. Like it really doesn't matter whether you win or lose on the actual surface level of it, but did you give everything you possibly have? And from those failures, you learn, like, I gave everything I have, but I learned and I can get better for next time. Through those victories, you knew you left it all on the table. A lot of times, like whether you win or lose, like you may have a win and it still may not be super fulfilling. And you may have a loss and you might have been the most fulfilled ever, because at the end of the day, you know in your heart if you gave it your all. I think that's what that quote says. So for the next generation, what I take this quote as is we all have God-given potential to do whatever we want to do. We can't do everything, but we can do the thing that we focus on, that one singular focus, and give that our all. And in today's society, I think a lot of people, especially the younger generation, is written off, says, you can't really amount to much. I don't really have too much confidence in you. You're scrolling TikTok, watching Instagram videos all day. But I believe that we can prove them wrong. We can show the people that don't believe that we are a generation that is going to work hard. We're going to take this next generation. We're going to be the best that has ever come. And so I'd say, just for anyone out there that's maybe considering starting a business or wants to start a business, wants to do something big in this world, is just simply start. Like, just start doing the things. Like, maybe just start reading, start watching some of the videos on how to start marketing, getting your first few customers, starting to self-develop. Like, it's just those small steps. And that's one of the biggest things I've learned throughout my journey, is it's just got to start small. You start with those small victories and they start to compound. You start to learn more skills, and the more and more skills that open up, the more opportunity comes. But you have to start and take action. So hope you all enjoyed this podcast. Changed up the style a little bit. Did a little personal touch on this one for episode 12. All right. Take care. Bye.